And you know what? I do have to show my self view so that it comes out with both of us on here. Okay. All right, Jim Manske.
Aloha.
Aloha. I'm in Mountain View, California, and you are in Maui. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
And it's 5:30 on Wednesday, April 27th. And I'm representing Brave Voices, a nonprofit that its goal is to break the cycle of silence that perpetuates childhood sexual abuse. And so it's all about starting the conversation, getting comfortable, thinking, listening, learning, and talking about the goal is to normalize the conversation. And Jim is my NVC trainer, assessor. And I've asked Jim to come and, everything that we do within Brave Voices is under the umbrella of nonviolent communication. And so, just want to pick your brain a little bit and do some what I consider deeper work. So I just want to start off with your definition of nonviolent communication, the purpose.
Yeah, well, I would say that I like Marshall's definition. So it's the one that I kind of have memorized in my head, and I probably said it 10,000 times, that the purpose of nonviolent communication is to create a quality of connection that inspires compassionate giving and receiving. The shortcut would be, let's figure out how to make life more wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then, I've heard you talk about the four different components necessary for connected communication: self-empathy, honesty, empathy, and self-connection. Can you kind of do a little synopsis about why those are all so important?
Yeah, so I think what you're talking about is these three different ways or modes that we can practice nonviolent communication. And so the first way we can practice it is called self-connection or self-empathy, where we're just using the tools of NVC to inquire into ourselves, what's going on. And then that's like a foundational place that then we can practice interrelationally with other people. So it starts inside, and then we move to a relational space. And in relational space, then I've got two different ways I can either be sending or receiving. The receiving part we call empathy or listening, and the sending part we call honesty or authenticity, and something like that. So it's just that simple. It's basically what we're always doing anyway. We're always connecting with ourselves, whether we're aware of it or not. You're constantly checking in with what's going on in you. And then at some point, you're either led to either speak what's alive in you and or listen to what's alive in somebody else.
Yeah, and so it all sounds easy. Right? Just give ourselves some empathy, be honest with ourselves. And I don't find it to be that easy.
Mm-hmm.
I remember at a very young age when my father was spanking me, that I went in and I remember where I was at, and I thought to myself, I am not going to let you see that you've affected me.
Mm-hmm.
And, it has been a detriment to my life to not allow others to see how they have how I've been impacted.
Sure.
And so, I'm going to come across with a hardness and a strongness and defense. Oof, lots and lots of defensiveness, right? This is so funny because I'm feeling a little teary right now as I'm sharing this.
Of
I
course
didn't,
you are. Of
yeah.
course you
Um, yeah, so being honest and allowing others to know I'm hurting takes trust. And yeah. What is some suggestions for others like myself that um yeah, we're going to have this wall. And I know one of what Marshall's sayings is every single thing that is not said is a wall between us,
are.
right? And so how am we going to have intimacy with others if we're not letting all of who we are be shared?
Yeah, so it's a puzzle for us, isn't it? Yeah. So, first, you're not alone, of course. Lots of us, probably everybody, at least in the educational system that you and I grew up with here in the United States, we all suffered some kind of an educational system that was based on punishment and rewards. I'm grateful that my parents broke the cycle of violence in our house. I'm pretty sure my brother, who was a little bit older than me, 8 years older than me, he did get hit, but I never got hit. Maybe one little time by my mom, which I remember, and I never let her live it down. But they were pretty devoted to using words rather than hands or sticks to communicate when they were not happy with something that I did. But even in that case, because of the way we've been educated and the language that we use, we can still feel terrible shame and guilt because words can be used punitively as well. And so none of us, I think, are immune to that. And you also say that, heard you say that this isn't easy. It's really easy to say what NVC is. It's to see four things: observation, feelings, needs, request, self-empathy, empathy, and honesty. I mean, Marshall used to joke that you could learn the essence of NVC and memorize it in 5 minutes if you really wanted to. Then it takes a lifetime to practice.
Mhm.
I look at it a little bit different in that you're always practicing NVC. And I got that also from Marshall. I think it was the second training I ever went to with him. He was standing at the front of the room and he said, how many of you are here because you think that I can teach you nonviolent communication? And of course, we all raised our hand. I'm sitting on the front row and I'm really excited to be there. It's my second time with Marshall and I can barely contain my excitement to be with him again. And he said, well, then I'm sorry. I'm about to disappoint you all. So I got very curious and I leaned forward. What's going on here? And Marshall said, I can't teach you NVC. And so I'm on the front row and I'm the eager student, because I learned through the educational system that if I sat on the front row and raised my hand a lot, I'd get rewarded with attention. So I raised my hand and I said, Marshall, what do you mean you can't teach us NVC? I paid good money for you to pay to teach me NVC. And he looked at me, and Marshall had this incredible ability to independently move his eyebrows. I wish I could do that. I think it's a great comedic effect. And so Marshall raised one eyebrow, and he looked at me kind of askance, and he said, how can I teach you what you already are?
Ah.
And so I've been thinking about that now for 20 years and doing my best to live as if that's true. And here's what I mean: that if Marshall's right, and I now have had the direct experience that what he said was true, that he can't teach us our basic nature, that our basic nature is to enjoy compassionate giving and receiving. That's who we are. Just imagine you're with a brand new baby that's just come out of the womb. That baby's already completely capable of compassionate giving and receiving. You make that first eye contact with that baby. I was there when my son was born. I had that experience. Same with my daughter. It was an instant connection. Nobody had to teach my kids how to do that.
No.
Nobody had to teach me how to do that. It's as natural as breathing. And so then it becomes what gets in the way of that natural connection. And I think we've already pointed to it. It has to do with language. Okay, so we could spend a lot of time, and NBC is really good at coming up with skills and strategies to work on the language thing so we can start speaking to ourselves and others in a more life connected way. And I do that in my training, of course, as well. And I think there's an accelerator. I think there is it's like I just never had this image before, but it's like a particle accelerator. I'm a particle of life, and how can I accelerate my expansion into NVC consciousness? And it's through gratitude. And so the quickest way to start practicing NVC is to use the same skill set, self-connection, honesty, and empathy, to convey when our needs are being satisfied, and convey it directly to the person. Like right now, I could practice with you. I could say, Cheryl, I'm really, I hear about your project, Brave Voices. I don't know much about it yet, but what I've read, it's like I'm really, really touched and really, really grateful that you're bringing this kind of work to the world, that you're willing to open up really painful conversations. And that just contributes to not only healing in the world, but a sense of connection and shared mission between you and me right now. And I'm just imagining all the needs that are being met by this project. And right now, I just feel so grateful that you're doing that. So I wonder how you feel when you hear that from me.
There's a big deep sigh for having the work that I'm doing be recognized and appreciated and to be seen. And I love hearing that there's a shared vision, right? That you too care about the protection of future generations of children and their safety. So yeah, I feel settled in my body and supported.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That wasn't too hard, was it? It was as natural as falling off the log, right? I just went to my heart. I found out what was authentically alive in me. I shared it with you using these four components. I said what the observation was, what I was responding to, your project. I talked about the needs of mine that your project is contributing to. That's the needs part, the kind of the cornerstone of nonviolent communication. Then I reported how I felt right now, not when I first heard about it, and not at some future time when it's all finished or anything like that, but right now how I felt. And then I ended on a clear and present request. And then I went to empathy, and you then reported what was alive in you, and I received you. I didn't really have to say any words to convey my empathy. I could tell that you could tell that we were getting each other. That's NVC in a nutshell. So that's the easy way to practice. And that's where I most always start in our training, is with gratitude and other life affirming emotions that are its cousins.
That's really great. Thank you. So I want to go back a little bit to the part about the defensiveness that that for years and years and years I've created as self-protection. And the knowing within me that that is a block to intimacy and connection with others. And yeah, just I hear that there's gratitude, and any other ideas about how we release and let that go?
Yeah, the defensiveness and so forth.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, there's probably 10,000 ways to let it go. And I think I found a way to express it that brings all of self-empathy down into 3 steps for people. So the first step is to notice.
Mhm.
So you notice the defensiveness, and it shows up in one of 2 ways. It shows up as a sensation in the body, like the wanting to move away or whatever, uh, or it might be an emotion that comes up, like fear or anxiety or guilt, something like that, anger. So then the other way that it might show up is with thinking.
Mhm.
So the first step for me is just to notice that these things are happening, that I am reacting. I don't think now I've been practicing NVC for more than 20 years, and I'm totally confident that those reactions are never going to go away. So how about I figure out how to utilize them for connection and compassionate giving and receiving? So learning to notice them for me is the first step. Then once I notice them, I name it. So step 1, notice. Step 2, name. Oh, there's a defensive strategy coming up in me. Okay. Um, all right. Just naming often reduces the amount of disconnection remarkably. If not, then I can go to the third step, which is to allow. So notice, name, and allow. Now, allowing means to accept that this is what's going on in me. I'm feeling defensive right now. I'm feeling scared right now. I'm feeling judgmental right now. I want to run away right now. And I mean, it's already happening anyway. It doesn't do any good to compound my pain by adding on the suffering of resisting what's going on in me. So I allow it. Well, that's easier said than done, right? It's
Yeah.
and so the doing of it can be by going to needs. What's the need that's alive in me? What are the feelings pointing me towards? So when I'm having this defensive reaction, now I understand that that defensive reaction is coming out of the need to protect myself. Well, of
Mhm.
course I need to protect myself. I got all kinds of messages when I was a kid, and sometimes the messages for you were delivered with a spanking. So of course you're going to be protecting yourself. And so, okay, so that's my need. Well, there's nothing wrong with having a need to protect myself. That need is beautiful. Look at how a good job I've managed to make it to 66 years old because of that need and all the strategies that I've developed over my 66 years to protect myself. So now, now I'm allowing myself, I'm making it okay to be a human being with needs.
Mhm.
And then, so those are the 3 main steps of self-connection. And then from the being anchored in the need, now I have a choice. I'm free. Do I want to run away? I can still run away. Do I want to shut down the conversation, put up a boundary? That's fine. Do I want to engage? Well, that's okay too. So now I'm at a choice point, and I figure out what needs do I want to attend to here? Do I want to protect or do I want to connect? And so if
Mhm.
I actually assess the situation, and I'm actually noticing that I'm reacting not out of any real threat, but because of just an old story I have, and maybe I could connect. What's behind this defensiveness? Then I could go to either empathy for what the other person might have said that I'm defending myself against, or I could go to honesty and say what's alive in me as I sit with whatever they just said that I'm reacting to. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
It does. It does so much. Absolutely. Um, so going into the honesty, um, you, for me, are in a position of power. You are my assessor. You are uh, a teacher. So you have a position again of power um, and you are male, right? And so for me, and I believe many other people who were harmed sexually, again, more layers of defensiveness, right? Um, and I'm engaging, I'm doing all of this process, I'm aware, I'm making choices, I'm here. Oh my gosh, Jim, to tell you, number one, you have to know it's nothing about you. It's all about me, right? And you know that because you study nonviolent communication, but somebody else may not know that. But for me to say, oi, 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 Jim, it's amazing how much stress there is in my body being with you, and I kind of want to apologize that it's like, what's wrong with me that I feel stress and I'm creating tension that I'm sure you can feel. So, it's just like, how honestly, blah, blah, I think I'll say too much, I'll overshare, right? But I want to somehow, and maybe this is the self-empathy and giving myself all the empathy, which I do even prior to, right, being together. Blah, 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 blah. How am I going to? This is a human being, and of course, the more I get to know you or other people in positions of power who are male, I get better at, once I get to know them, all of that dissipates. But during the time of not knowing, how the heck, and I think about my marble jar, and I think about, every time we're together and it goes well, I'm going to put some more marbles in that. But it's the taking the risk and seeing the outcome and then taking a little bit more risk. um
Yeah.
how within VC, can you imagine helping those of us who struggle in a similar position, being honest and learning to trust and risk?
Yeah. Well, I would take the advice that you just gave, right? To take your time, go slow, make sure it's a trustworthy relationship. It might not be. I like giving people the benefit of the doubt, but I don't have a trauma history like a lot of people do. My parents didn't hit me. And I do have a lot of structural power in our relationship. And I do have structural power in the world that we currently live in, where white males, especially, that have, um, are my age and so forth, we get deference. And so uh, I need to do my work to help make it easier for you. And then you can do your own work by doing exactly what you said. You check to make sure it's a trustworthy relationship. And then if it is, you put a marble in the jar. Or as Stephen Covey used to say, make a little deposit into the emotional bank account. And then you maybe try again another time to say something that's vulnerable for you and see how I respond. Do I respond with empathy, or do I respond with criticism or punishment or something like that? And then gradually a relationship will grow where we have the sense of, hopefully we're moving towards, I call it equivalence. A lot of people call it equality. I like the word equivalence because it points to that everybody's needs have an equal value, whether you're a white or a black or a male or a female or an American or a Chinese person or a kid or a old person or whatever. Everybody's needs have the same value. So that's the world that I want to live in, is an equivalent world. But you don't know that.
Yeah.
You don't know that until you take the risk and open up a conversation. And gradually we get to know each other. And then maybe you come to a decision that, oh, I can try a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. But the honest truth is, in my experience, every time I open my mouth, it's a risk. I already wonder. Now, we've been talking for about 20 minutes or something like that. How many people have I unintentionally impacted by the words I've chosen to share? You know, now I wasn't trying to, and yet somebody might be listening to this and they might take it because of of their particular history. They might take something that I say and turn it into pain.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really sad about that. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a risk I take anytime I open my mouth. You
Mm-hmm.
never know what's going to happen. Even if my intention is as clear and as clean as can be, it still might have an impact on you. So I need to be aware of that. what part is mine, and take responsibility for that, take as much care as I can in what I do express, and then end on a clear and present request, or let you know that I'm done. And then be ready after I'm finished with my honesty to then receive you with empathy and warmth and resonance and so forth. Does that make sense to you?
It does, yeah. And that leads into the next question in my brain, which is, when I am describing to folks who are coming to our, what I call the empowered, courageous, brave conversations, right? That there is no safe space. And together we're creating a brave space, because, as you're saying, we never know what the impact will be on anyone else. And I want, the idea behind Brave Voices is that we, choose to sit in the discomfort of challenging conversations. And I may be sharing something in my life that will trigger or have an impact on someone else. And so my request is that we learn how to self-regulate ourselves, so that if I hear something that somebody else says, I'm going to give myself that empathy, and wow, that's hard to hear. And that brings up so many memories and pain. And I really wished I wouldn't have heard that. However, take responsibility or choose to leave the room. This is more of a discussion that I can be comfortable with right now. But when I say this is not a safe space, this is a brave space, just saying those words are scary enough for some people to not want to participate.
Sure.
And I do elaborate. I, explain the difference between a brave space and a safe space. And it's small steps towards having all the skills. This is where the challenge comes in, right? For those of us that have been practicing a long time, we have learned how to self-regulate. We have learned how to translate the tragic expression into what might this person be needing.
Right.
Any suggestions on how to convey that it's vitally important for all of us to share our honesty, and that we are not responsible for how it lands with another, and that dichotomy between how much we care about how it lands with another?
Yeah. So I think this is a really important question, and it's way more complicated than words could ever tell us how to answer, right? This is almost beyond words. And so the simple way that I look at it, and again, I think I got this from Marshall, is you're only responsible for what you can control, right? By the way, I love this distinction. I wrote it down between bravery versus safety, or a brave space versus a safe space, because bravery means I'm scared, but I'm going to do it anyway, right? And so that's the
Without
world
knowing
that I
what the
want.
outcome is.
Yeah, because we never know the outcome.
Yeah,
That's the honest truth.
yeah.
Every breath could be our last. I mean, that's just the way it is. And so I really like that distinction. And as to how to, I would say that the way that I hold it is, before I open my mouth, I want to be clear on why I'm opening my mouth. And so we call this the zero step.
Mhm.
And this isn't a concept we learned from Marshall, but we did learn it in an NVC practice group from somebody. It was the very first practice group we ever went to after we met Marshall. And this guy was standing in the front of the room, Mel Schneider, and he put up on the board, he put up 1, 2, 3, 4. And then he said, you guys probably know what I'm going to write. I'm going to write these 4 components of nonviolent communication. He did: observation, feeling, need, request. Then he put a 0 in front of the 1. And of course, we all just did this workshop, and we just finished reading Marshall's book. And so this wasn't in there. What's this going to be? He says, Zero points to what I call the zero step. And the zero step is what you do before you do these other four things. And so what it means is, number one, I get clear on my intention. And I want to go back to that intention we started the conversation with. My intention is to create a quality of connection that inspires compassionate giving and receiving. If that's not my intention, I can predict with very high accuracy that the conversation is going to go off the rails very, very quickly. If I want to convince you, convict you, correct you, or any of those things, then I want to pause until I get clear on that intention to connect. So that's one element. The second element is attention. Where am I going to place my attention? Am I going to bring up all the luggage from the past? All the times that you didn't listen to me, or, all my old stories about you? No, not if I want to live that first intention. I need to become present. So then there's all these mindfulness tools like breathing and so forth that can help us to become more present in this conversation. The magic happens when I'm clear on my intention, I'm clear on my attention, I naturally open to outcome. So now when I do open my mouth and I share what's alive in me, and I'm smart enough to end on a clear and present request, I don't expect that I know what you're going to do. If my request is for empathy, I might get your honesty. If my request is for your honesty, I might get your empathy. If my request is for your feelings and needs, I might get your judgments. But because I've done my zero step work, then I'm not going to hear your thoughts. I'm going to become like a, a person who can't practice telepathy. I won't be able to hear your thoughts. I'll only hear your feelings and needs. So even if you say, Jim, you're not being honest with me, I'm not going to hear that. I'm going to hear, oh, she's really longing for some authenticity that she's not getting yet.
So in your brain, you are a translator. You are.
I am, number one, that's my number one task in empathy. First to translate, then to transform, and then to transcend. So it's like, first I'm going to try to translate your judgment into the language of feelings and needs. And then I'm going to that will transform our experience. Now I'm no longer your enemy. You're just a human being with needs. You're not trying to attack me. I don't have to defend myself. In fact, if I do defend myself, I'm going to probably get even more attacked. Right. And so, and then we can transcend our old stories, our old programs, and move into this, what Marshall called a beloved divine energy. The beloved divine energy is his word for needs. It's who we really are, and it's what we always share. So if you have a need for authenticity that's not being met in the moment, and you told me this in this tragic way that I'm not being honest with you or whatever you just said, then, and I can live into this zero step, then I am going to use that as an opportunity to enter beloved divine energy with you, because that's where I already am. And here I say, oh, she's needing authenticity. I need that too. What could I do that might help? And then we're going to have a different kind of a dialogue. It's still going to be uncomfortable and hard. And I might forget my zero step. I might do all that self-empathy work and be totally in zero. And then you say the one trigger, the one button. And it's like, what's NVC?
Yeah, I know.
Right? Yeah. So that can happen too. If that happens, then I go back to self-empathy, notice, name, allow. And then, so it becomes this kind of life-serving loop between zero step, self-empathy. I should do it the other way. Self-empathy, if I'm not in a zero step, then from the zero step, then practice honesty or empathy. If I'm practicing empathy, it doesn't require any words. That's the thing that a lot of people miss in nonviolent communication. They think that empathy is the words that we say, but it's not. Empathy is where we're placing our attention. And so that's one choice. It's just to be with you and listen to you like you're doing it right now. You're just with me, and you're letting me know non-verbally that you're with me. That's one choice. The other choice is to go to honesty, and then you share what's in your heart and end on a clear and present request. And then we can dialogue about the most uncomfortable, awful subjects until we get tired. I want
Mm-hmm.
to go meet some other needs.
Mm-hmm.
Make sense?
It does make sense. Yep. And the belief is that for those of us who want to break the cycle of silence, that by practicing this, it's going to be easier for us to get comfortable. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think, your program, you're taking people directly to the PhD level, right? You're inviting people to have some of the hardest conversations that can be had on the planet. And so I would say that another important thing as people are learning this practice of nonviolent communication, that they practice with easy stuff.
Yeah.
And so maybe the first time you practice about the fact that you didn't do the dishes the way that I liked you to do them, or you forgot to get the kids at school, or kind of minor observations until you can put enough marbles in the jar to be able to then have trust that we can have a conversation about that tone you use sometimes, or whatever it is that I really want to get to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Starting with baby steps. All right. Well, I'm conscious of time. So I think that is a wonderful start to having connection. And that's a lot to digest right there. So um, I appreciate the clarity with the 0 step and um, incorporating that it's all about the connection. Do I want to be connected with you? Or gosh, am I really wanting to be angry and blame and shame and judge? And okay, then I'm going to have to take a deep breath and
Yeah,
how can I get back and into a place where I'm going to initiate this conversation
yeah,
with the intention of connection?
yeah. Yeah, I think one of the keys is to be gentle with yourself, to actually be the person you wished your parents had been, or your grandparents, or whoever was your caretaker, to actually be that for yourself now, and to hold yourself in the inevitable times when you don't meet your own expectations of how you want to communicate, because that's going to happen. So be gentle with yourself and be resonant with yourself. Love yourself through the learning curve. Um, Although the steps of NVC are easy to memorize, the practice of it is challenging because of the emotions that naturally bubble up in us.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when the main thing is just be gentle with yourself. And then the second piece of advice is to go to gratitude. That's the easiest way to practice. Build your resourcefulness
Mm-hmm.
with gratitude. We recommend that people do a written gratitude practice, and then that will begin to create enough. You get to put your own marbles in the jar. Then you don't have to have anybody else put any marbles in the jar,
Mm-hmm.
because you're living in this world of gratitude. And so those are the two main things: be gentle with yourself and shift when possible, not about out of any energy of should, but shift whenever possible. I like the way Doug Dolstead says it. He's another certified trainer. He says, look for evidence that your needs have been satisfied.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
a radical shift for most of us.
Mm-hmm.
Really goes against our biology. Our
Mm-hmm.
biology is there for a good reason, that we have a negativity bias. We look for what's wrong,
Yep.
and that's good that we have that built into us. It saved us from stepping on snakes, or it saved us from all kinds of a million things, and sometimes it can get in the way. And
Mm-hmm.
so to balance that negativity bias with a new way of looking at the world, to look for evidence of needs that have been satisfied.
Yep, I totally agree. One of the fun games I've been playing with myself for quite a long time is just pulling a random need from my Grok deck, and then whatever that need is, just being aware and conscious all day long on how it is met, either by myself or another, so that I'm going through the day.
That's
Look,
a wonderful strategy. When
yes,
Jory and
it's
I were
fun.
first learning NVC, we do Grok cards hadn't been invented yet, And so grateful that there's so many more tools for people now. But we made our own needs cards
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
of little business card stock, and we would stick them all over the place. We stick them on the bathroom mirror. We put our needs chart on the refrigerator. We would take the need cards and stick them in a sock drawer. I'd stick them in someplace in where Jory would find it. And so all of a sudden, you're doing something, and here would come respect or
Uh,
love or
I
whatever the name is.
love, I wished I would have been raised by you guys. I can't imagine how fun that would have been to.
Well, our kids actually were pretty much the edge of adulthood by the time we learned
Oh,
NVC.
okay.
But we had other practices that had prepared us very well for NVC, and in fact, we kind of made some big mistakes in our early NVC days. The reason that we met Marshall was because both kids went off to college at the same time. So this was the year 2000. Our son was scheduled to go off to college, but our daughter left high school a year early. Jaya, who I think you talked to, a year early, and so we suddenly had an empty nest. And so to fill up that void, that unexpected void of having our both of our kids go away, the mourning that we were feeling, I took it on myself to find something fun to do every day that autumn.
Oh,
And so
oh.
now we're pretty deep into November, maybe November the 6th or something like that. And this guy, Marshall Rosenberg's coming to town. I never heard of Marshall Rosenberg. And he was coming to offer a training for volunteer mediators. Jory and I had been volunteer mediators for about 7 years. And so he came to the training, and we walked in, and within 15 minutes, everything had changed in my whole life. And unfortunately, I did what a lot of people do when they first learn NVC is they think it's about a way that you talk.
Mhm.
And so then the kids came home for Thanksgiving or whatever, and we started talking to them in NVC speak. And my daughter said something like, uh, "Who stole you? And who stole my parents and left you here?" Right? Because we thought NVC was about the words, not about the energy. And so that was great feedback for us. And the fact that now she's actively involved in the nonviolent communication community is a testament to her ability to stick with us during the steep part of our learning curve. And so we've tried to take that lesson, and now we tell people, don't talk like this except unless when you're in a practice group.
Right.
Just talk normally and hold the consciousness of connection, and then things will go a lot smoother for you.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah, that's great advice. And you mentioned mourning, and along with gratitude, I believe mourning is one of the most important universal needs that so many of us aren't conscious and aware of. And sometimes that is all that there is left to do is mourn. There is no solution. There's nothing that we can change.
That's right.
And we just have to feel it. And
It's really the same coin as gratitude. It's just the other side of it. On one side of the coin, you've got the feeling in the body when your needs are satisfied. It's going to be some kind of life affirming emotion like joy, gratitude, pride of accomplishment, inspiration, and so forth. You turn the coin over, and what you've got are the natural consequence of when needs are not satisfied. That's called pain.
mhm,
And sometimes there's nothing you can do about the pain. There's nothing you can do about the fact of what happened to you when you were 5 years old or whatever.
yeah,
All you can do is just mourn that even now, even though that might have happened 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, or 80 years ago, there's nothing you can do about it but mourn. And mourning is exactly the same process as gratitude. It takes you to exactly the same place. It's this, what Marshall called it, sweet pain. Oh man, I really wish I had that quality of tender, loving care that I long for every child to have now. I really want to live in a world where there's opportunity for conversations that can be very challenging to have, where there are brave spaces where people can enter and sit in the fire together And that's not really there in the way that we would like. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing this program. You'd be going to the beach. But
Yeah.
instead, you're doing this program so that you can start building this container for these kinds of conversations to happen. And
Hmm.
so I mourn that it's not done, even as I said. So what happens immediately? I'm mourning that it's not there, and then I shift and I say, wow, but Cheryl's working on this. There's probably other people working on similar things. And so then my mourning goes from sweet pain to gratitude and back and forth and back and forth. And that's just the way, that's the sweet spot of life.
Mm.
So we use both of those. I call them the twin motivators. They're the twin motivators of all social change. One is pain, and the other is pleasure. We naturally move away from pain. Even an amoeba will move away from pain. It doesn't take a big brain to move away from pain, and and then we're also motivated to move towards pleasant feelings or gratitude.
Hmm.
So this is how we begin to live life. What's going to meet my needs, and how can I serve life so that more needs for other people can be met? And I feel that pain of whatever project that I'm working with. In your case, it's the pain of unhad conversations.
Hmm.
How can we take that pain and turn it into energy? Does that
Hmm.
make sense?
Totally. Yeah. And as you're talking, I'm really getting clarity as far as, because my question over and over and over is, how can I convince people to sit in the initial discomforts of uncomfortable conversations? And as I'm hearing you talk, it really is coming back to the needs that will be met. Um,
Yeah, I don't know what your strategy is, but I'll tell you, let me tell you a real sweet story. We were in China. Jory and I had the privilege of going to teach NVC all over Asia. We've gone about, oh, maybe 12, 15 trips to China, Japan, Singapore, and so forth. And once we were in front of a group of about 40 people in China. And at the time, I think Jory was about 70, 71 years old, something like that. And so she's just sharing about something, and just in her Jory like way, she just happens to mention, probably talking about openness to outcome. She probably said something like I said a little while ago, you never know when your last breath is going to be. And she says, I'm 71 years old. I might die tomorrow. And the energy in the room went dark. I mean, it was like, and people started pulling out their Kleenex, and they were crying, and we were just like puzzled. I noticed it happening, and I kind of leaned over to the translator and I said, "What just happened?" And she said, "In China, we feel really sad when grandmothers die, and we see Jory as a grandmother." And so we immediately dropped the project of whatever we were teaching about, got out our grok cards, which were in Chinese, and we all sat on the floor and we invited who wants to speak what's going on in you.
mm,
And someone would talk about how their grandmother died, or how they were feeling scared about Jory being old and never coming back to China, or whatever it was. And everybody else in the group would look at the big mass of grok cards in the middle, pick up a card, and go and deliver it to the person who was expressing.
mm.
And then that would happen for a while until there was that moment of, you know,
That they were bringing the needs
they
that
would
they
just
were.
bring in no words were exchanged, just the needs cards.
Mhm.
And then so that person would settle back into silence, and someone else would speak. And in about 20, 25 minutes, we had a really difficult conversation that was just expression and silent empathy. And that made it really safe. And then we took a 10-minute break, and then we went back into the training. And everybody really got a lot of benefit out of that. So
Mhm.
over and over again, we returned to that kind of a morning circle to help make these initial conversations um, easier, because the person listening doesn't have to say a single word. That's the hard part,
Mhm.
is knowing, now what do I do with your pain, especially for people with bodies like mine, by the way, male bodies. We've been programmed since the time we were 5 years old that our job is to fix it.
Yeah.
And so if you tell me you're in pain, I'm going to try to fix you. And that is the opposite of what you need. You don't want to be fixed. You want to be empathized with. You want to be acknowledged. You want to be held. You want to be loved. If I try to fix you, I'm going to make it worse. But if I
Mm-hmm.
can just be quiet and acknowledge your experience, either non-verbally or with needs cards or with the fewest possible number of words, then we can make these uncomfortable conversations go with a little more smoothness and fun and pleasure.
Yeah, I love that. One of the things that I do often in starting with groups is, what needs do you need to have met in order to even think, listen, learn, or speak about this difficult subject of childhood sexual abuse? And then
Yes.
I work with soul collages, and so give everybody the opportunity to go inside and make their soul collage and start it with that. So it's
That makes so much sense because now you're contacting the heart and the whole left brain, and you're using imagery and metaphor to get to that level of needs. There's no words really for needs. Needs are, it's just a map, a very inaccurate map for trying to describe a territory that is really beyond words. How can you describe beloved divine energy?
right.
So I love your strategy of going to imagery.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. And I love offering the needs in silence. That
Yeah,
takes away from putting any story along with them. So
yeah,
I just
yeah.
guess.
It's so funny that the most powerful conversations take the least number of words.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's the connection.
It's all about the connection.
That beloved connection.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, Jim, for your time today.
Well, did we put any marbles in the jar?
Many, so many marbles. The jar's overflowing.
Oh, good, good. Well, I hope that as we continue to work together in your journey, that you will soon see that I have no power over you.
No.
None whatsoever. In fact, I'll make this promise. I don't know who's going to see this recording, but I will never assess you. It's not
Okay.
my job.
Okay.
I'm here to be to sponsor you,
I
to
like that.
actually see you as a certified trainer. You're already a certified trainer as far as I can tell. And my job is to sponsor you until you can own it for yourself.
Hmm.
So we're assessing you together. How does that sound?
That sounds, I love sponsor. That's so much nicer. The rebellious part of me that, I'm an 8 on the Enneagram. So any form of power over me, whew, I'm out of there. So, and I know that about myself and I try not to, but and yeah, so I won't
Yeah,
even, yeah,
yeah.
I love that sponsor. Thank you. And I am a certified trainer. You better believe
Right.
it. Thank you, Jim.
You're very welcome.